Ingrid Escamilla was a young woman full of dreams, trapped in a nightmare that ended in one of the most brutal and disturbing femicides in recent memory. After her death, graphic images were shared without consent, multiplying the pain and exposing a profound lack of ethics. All of Mexico was in shock, and the world watched as a victim was violated yet again, even after she was gone. This is the truth behind the crime that shook a nation. Ingrid was born on October 3, 1994 in Necaxa, Canaditas, a small town in the municipality of Juan Galindo in Puebla, Mexico. She was the youngest of 5 sisters. Alongside her twin, Betsy, she experienced significant changes at home from a very young age. Her mother, Antelma Vargas, was present during her early years, but over time, it was her father who single-handedly took on the responsibility of raising his daughters, and he did so with total devotion. Ingrid always spoke of him with deep respect. She admired him for being both a father and a mother, for giving everything when he had almost nothing for himself. When he passed away in early 2016, she wrote that having him in her life was an adventure, remembering him as a strong, loving, and brave man who knew how to keep his family together. From a young age, Ingrid stood out, not just for her beauty. She was crowned a beauty queen in Necaxa, but for her presence in the community. She was a committed, compassionate, and generous woman. When the earthquake of September 19, 2017 shook Mexico, Ingrid did not stand idly by. She went to Joyutla de Juarez as a volunteer to help rebuild homes. She didn't just work with her own hands, she encouraged others to join her. On her social media, Ingrid shared glimpses of her world, a cheerful woman passionate about life, a lover of travel, a Harry Potter fan, and a follower of artists like Luis Miguel and Belanova. She was also an animal advocate, always looking out for their protection. She loved fashion and beauty, so much so that she started a second Instagram account dedicated to these topics. It was one of her dreams to grow it into something more. Academically, she studied at Albert Einstein High School and later graduated with a degree in tourism business administration. She also earned a master's degree from the meritorious Autonomous University of Puebla. Following the example of effort and responsibility her father had set, Ingrid dedicated herself to building her own path. Thanks to her commitment and education, she entered the professional world and eventually held a position in the auxiliary presidency of Necaxa. It was there, working in the municipal government, that she met Erick Francisco Robledo Rosas, the man who would become her partner. Erick was also from Necaxa, though they belonged to different generations. He was born on September 22, 1973, 21 years before her. His family was well known in the community. His father had been a respected teacher and his mother was a retired union worker. According to neighbors, Erick himself had worked for the local power company for a time. Those who knew him as an adult described him as a serious, even difficult person. One neighbor recalled him as a baseball fan who often got into conflicts during games, revealing an explosive temper. Before his relationship with Ingrid, Erick had been married and was the father of 2 children. His previous marriage had ended amid allegations of abuse. His ex-wife filed for divorce and a restraining order for domestic violence. One of his sons, Rodolfo, who was 15 at the time of the events that would later shock the country, had been diagnosed with autism. Details about Ingrid and Erick's relationship are scarce. Some sources claim they were together for 5 years, while others suggest they had only lived together for 9 months. What is certain is that at the time of the crime, they were living together in an apartment in the Vallejo neighborhood of Mexico City. Neighbors recalled that Erick moved in first and prepared the apartment, with Ingrid joining him a short time later after leaving her government job. Their arguments were frequent, so loud that the shouts and sounds of violence could be heard through the walls. The tense atmosphere was no secret. It was said that Ingrid rarely went out, and some mentioned that Erick had made an arrangement with the building's concierge to prevent her from receiving visitors when he wasn't home. Despite the turmoil behind closed doors, Ingrid often appeared cheerful on social media, posting smiling photos and sharing small personal achievements. In one post, she celebrated finishing her orthodontic treatment, happy to finally have the smile she had always dreamed of. Yet these same platforms hinted that something was wrong. In August 2018, Ingrid posted a message saying she wished she could die. In 2019, she wrote another, clearly aimed at a man, stating that just because someone blind couldn't see her value didn't mean she had no soul. According to later reports, Ingrid tried to escape the situation with Erick several times. At one point, she allegedly went to the prosecutor's office to report him for abuse, but she did not follow through with the process, and the complaint went nowhere. Although no formal record of this report was ever found, many close to her insisted she had sought help. In one incident that deeply marked the community, neighbors recalled police and firefighters having to intervene at their home. Ingrid, in a moment of profound desperation, was attempting to jump from the roof. Fortunately, first responders managed to calm her down. She would live for a few more days, unaware that her life was about to end, not by her own hand, but by the hands of the man who claimed to love her. On the day of the murder, according to his own testimony, Erick arrived home heavily intoxicated. They had an argument, as they had many times before, but this time, it escalated to a point of no return, ending Ingrid's life. What happened next was even more disturbing. Erick attempted to hide what he had done, desecrating Ingrid's body in a cruel and desperate effort to erase any trace of his crime. After several hours, he was the one who decided to speak. He called his ex-wife, Yvonne Barragan, and confessed. During that call, he revealed something horrifying. Their son, Rodolfo, who was in his care and at home that day, had witnessed everything. It was Yvonne who alerted the authorities. When the police arrived, they were met with a profoundly shocking scene. Ingrid showed no signs of life, and the state in which she was found reflected an extreme level of violence. Erick was also at the scene, and upon being detained, immediately confessed. When an officer asked him why he was covered in blood, he claimed he had a head wound from a fight with Ingrid. He explained they had argued because she was upset he was drinking. He alleged that Ingrid had threatened to kill him, that she had grabbed the knife first and wounded him before he took it from her and attacked. The news spread rapidly, both within Mexico and abroad. The crime shook the public for several reasons: its sheer brutality, a video of Erick's confession, and finally the publication of crime scene photos that should never have been made public. Explicit photographs of Ingrid's body circulated online and were printed in sensationalist tabloids, sparking profound social outrage. An internal investigation was launched against at least 6 officials who were among the first to arrive at the scene, as they were suspected of leaking the images. In response to the gravity of the case, Mexico City's then head of government, Claudia Sheinbaum, called for exemplary sanctions and urged the media to act with ethics and responsibility. However, it wasn't until December 2020 that a police officer was finally arrested for the leak. Human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, condemned the dissemination of the photos, denouncing the degrading treatment of Ingrid's memory and the re-victimization it caused. The viral spread of the images exposed not only the lack of ethics within institutions, but also among many ordinary people who shared them without considering the harm. In an act of digital resistance and dignity, a citizen initiative emerged to counteract the cruel exposure. Under the tag Ingrid Escamilla Challenge, people began posting photos of flowers, landscapes, and gentle portraits of Ingrid. The goal was to push the gruesome images down in search results, replacing them with a legacy of respect, beauty, and memory. While this was happening, Ingrid's remains were returned to her family. Her body was transported to her hometown of Necaxa, where she was mourned at her family home. After a mass, the funeral procession made its way to the municipal pantheon, where she was buried, accompanied by the deep sorrow of nearly 300 loved ones, neighbors, and friends. Erick, then 46, was placed in preventive detention at a psychosocial rehabilitation center. The judge set a 3-month period to conclude the investigation. The prosecution confirmed that the leaked photos would not be used as evidence, as their exposure compromised their judicial value. However, they had a strong case built on forensic evidence and the testimony of the first responders. The prosecutor also stated that Erick's son, Rodolfo, was considered an indirect victim, as they were certain the boy had witnessed the entire horrific event. He was in a state of shock and would receive specialized psychological care. On February 10th, the Attorney General revealed that femicides in Mexico had increased by 137% in the last 5 years. In the same press conference, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador claimed the issue of femicide was being manipulated by his political opponents. These official statements, made at the height of the media frenzy over Ingrid's case, fueled public discontent and a sense of helplessness. That same week, the newspaper La Prensa, one of the outlets that had published the graphic photos, responded to criticism with a letter on its front page, promising to review its journalistic practices. But words were not enough to quell the outrage. On February 14, 2020, thousands of people mobilized across the country. In Mexico City, protesters gathered outside the newspaper's offices, setting one of its vehicles on fire. That same day, feminist collectives raised their voices in front of the National Palace, demanding clear and firm answers from the president. 2 days later, on February 16th, a new demonstration gathered. This time, it was in front of the very building where Ingrid had been murdered. Women's organizations stood alongside the young woman's family. Among them was her aunt, Victoria Barrios, who made a public plea to the media. Whenever they spoke of Ingrid, they must do so with responsibility. Think carefully about what you publish, was her appeal, a call to resist the lure of sensationalism. Just over a year after the crime, this public outcry culminated in the passing of the Ingrid Law by the Mexico City Congress. The legislation was specifically designed to prevent a recurrence of what had happened in Ingrid's case: the leaking of sensitive images and materials from investigations to the media and social networks. The bill, introduced shortly after the murder by prosecutor Ernestina Godoy, establishes criminal penalties for anyone who disseminates photographs, videos, audio recordings, or documents related to an ongoing investigation. The law carries prison sentences ranging from 2 to 6 years, along with financial penalties and measures to ensure compliance. Beyond the capital, the Ingrid Law inspired similar legislative initiatives in other states across the country. At the national level, a significant step was taken in March of 2022, when the Chamber of Deputies unanimously approved a reform to Article 225 of the Penal Code. This reform established even harsher penalties, with prison terms of 4 to 10 years for those who distribute images or recordings related to criminal proceedings in a way that violates the dignity or rights of the victims. In addition to jail time, the sanctions also included substantial fines. As this investigation concluded, the debate was continuing in the Senate, where discussions were underway to elevate the Ingrid Law to a federal statute. This would allow for its application throughout the entire country, guaranteeing greater protection for victims and preventing similar cases from being met with impunity. While these legislative battles were being fought, the trial of Erick, Ingrid's confessed killer, faced a series of obstacles and delays. The global health emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic directly impacted the functioning of the judicial system. Compounding this were delaying tactics employed by the defense. Erick changed lawyers on several occasions, disrupting the continuity of the proceedings. Furthermore, the prosecution failed to meet all the established deadlines for presenting the required evidence. Over the course of the case, investigators conducted 25 police procedures and collected 43 pieces of evidence, including testimonies from numerous expert witnesses. Throughout the trial, Ingrid's mother, Antelma, along with Ingrid's sisters, were active participants, eventually taking the stand as witnesses. This stood in contrast to some earlier media reports which had claimed Antelma had abandoned her daughters in their childhood. The truth was that Antelma assumed a constant and visible role in the quest for justice for her daughter. Not only did she appear in court to give her testimony, but in July of 2021, she met with Ernestina Godoy, the Attorney General of Mexico City. In that meeting, Antelma voiced her frustration with the slow pace of the judicial process. She also demanded to know why she and her daughters had not received the necessary psychological support from the authorities, despite the profound trauma they had endured. On October 12, 2022, a pivotal hearing was held where the trial court was finally expected to issue a conviction against Erick. However, after several hours of arguments from both sides, the judges decided to pause. Citing the complexity of the case and the vast amount of evidence presented, the court ordered a recess to deliberate further. The final sentence, they announced, would be delivered the following day. The long-awaited day of reckoning for Ingrid finally arrived on October 13, 2022. On that day, the Mexico City trial court delivered its verdict against Erick Francisco Robledo Rosas, finding him guilty of the femicide of his partner, Ingrid Escamilla. The sentence was 70 years in prison, the maximum penalty allowed by law since the reform of the accusatory penal system in 2016. It was the first time this maximum sentence had been applied in a femicide case under the new legal framework. Judge Israel Perez Cuevas, who delivered the sentence, emphasized that the public ministry had presented solid and overwhelming evidence that clearly demonstrated the defendant's criminal responsibility. This evidence included testimonies, expert reports, and the facts of the crime itself. In addition to the prison term, the court ordered Erick Robledo to pay 616,000 pesos in compensation to Ingrid's family, plus a fine of 7,293 pesos to cover funeral expenses. His political rights were suspended and he was denied all substitute benefits of the sentence, meaning he will not be eligible for a reduced sentence or any form of early release. And so, 32 months after that tragic Sunday of February 9, 2020, when Ingrid's life was so brutally taken, her family could finally see justice respond. It was not just a sentence, but a validation of the suffering, the effort, and the dignity with which they had faced every stage of the process. Ingrid's mother, Antelma, expressed her satisfaction with the ruling with a quiet calm. She acknowledged that no sentence could bring her daughter back, but affirmed that this verdict confirmed it is possible to achieve justice for victims of femicide, even in the face of so much adversity. She took the moment to send a message to other families going through similar situations. Do not lose faith. Do not give up, because you can achieve your goals if you insist with conviction. She also recognized that this resolution, after a long and exhausting fight, would finally allow them to take a necessary breath, an emotional pause that had been postponed for nearly 3 years of pain and searching. How do you think the media should handle sensitive cases like this one? What other forms of peaceful protest do you believe can generate real change in society? We want to hear your thoughts. Let us know in the comments.